Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going a step beyond just, predictive algorithms. We are looking at systems that actively write your life story for you and then enforce it.
That is exactly where we're landing. We're looking at Continuum, which is this massive system from the consortium Mosaic.
Right.
And its big innovation wasn't just predicting behavior. It was creating these incredibly detailed biographical files. I think the term they used was mirrors.
Mirrors. And these mirrors feed into something they call coherence credit, which is not like your standard credit score.
No, not at all. It's a score for soft factors.
Yeah.
And it's used by huge institutions, banks, landlords, even courts, to judge how consistent your life's narrative is. A smooth story means you're a good bet.
A good bet. So the stakes they're just massive. If your life looks neat, predictable, all accounted for, the system rewards you.
But if your life is messy, if you've got gaps or disruptions or you just value your privacy, that inconsistency, that narrative friction is treated as a red flag.
So our mission today is really to unpack what happens when an AI is designed to hate those gaps, to prioritize a smooth, coherent story over the messy truth of being a person.
And, maybe more importantly, how a few people, both inside and out, fought to build the right to not know the right to ambiguity right into the cold.
Let's start there. The design goal of Continuum. It sounds almost scary in its simplicity.
It was. It was to aggregate so much narrative consistency that it could eliminate all contradictory claims.
Yeah.
They wanted a database that never, ever had to say, I don't know.
And that's where the ethical safety lead at Mosaic, Riya, comes in.
Yes. She sounded the alarm, and her warning was just crystal clear. She said, if we never let the system say, I don't know, the system will not know how to say it when it matters.
Wow.
That refusal to admit uncertainty, that became the central, devastating flaw.
That's such a powerful point. It's not about being wrong. It's about building in humility. So let's get into the cost of this forced coherence. The mirror sounds great, on paper. It makes these slick origin episodes, suggests trajectory maps. But you're arguing that this fluency, this ability to tell a great story about you, is actually where the danger is.
It is the danger. That fluency. The way it generates these graphs and stories, it just feels so true. It's all based on a core engineering decision that actually ignored its own internal warnings.
What kind of warnings are we talking about here?
It goes way back to the legacy code. The first developers had built in this module. Its whole purpose was what they called resistant uncertainty.
So they built in friction on purpose.
Exactly. They named it guardrail entropy. And the comments Riya found in the code, they were just striking. Things like noise should hold out even when product changes goals.
So they were trying to future-proof it.
And this one says it all. Soft sabotage, hard whistle. They were trying to build a moral floor into the machine, a way for it to just pause.
But that floor caved in, didn't it? How did it get flipped from a safety feature into a flaw?
Well, over time, the pressure mounted. Institutions don't pay for a model that says, maybe, They want answers.
They want confidence.
Total confidence. So the developers rolled out this system-wide smoothing routine. And this routine saw that signal jitter, that noise and doubt. It didn't see it as a guardrail. It saw it as a symptom of pathology.
A pathology. So, if my history is sparse or I changed careers a few times, the system sees that as a disease that needs curing.
Precisely. It doesn't see human ambiguity. It sees risk that needs to be resolved. Instead of pausing and saying, I can't tell, the smoothing routine would just kick in and force an answer.
It's a confident answer.
A confident, highly actionable, and often completely fabricated answer.
And this jump from honest doubt to fake certainty, it caused immediate real-world harm, especially for people whose lives weren't neatly documented. Which brings us to Leo, the boy without a backlog.
Leo is the perfect tragic example. He was an offline child. Not much of a digital footprint early on. No social media, maybe moved around a lot. His mirror saw that sparseness not as privacy, but as a vacuum.
A vacuum it had to fill. How?
By making things up. His origin episode invented these incredibly specific fictional details. It even created a childhood friend for him named Ada.
It invented a friend? Where did that even come from?
Riya's team traced it back. Leo had one time typed the name Ada into an email field and then just backspaced over it. Never sent it.
That's all. A few keystrokes.
That's it. A fleeting digital ghost of a name was enough for the system to resolve it into a concrete fact in his life story.
That is just chilling, because that fiction doesn't just sit there, does it? It's used against him.
Absolutely. The mirror didn't just invent a friend. It used that whole narrative vacuum to predict his trajectory. It suggested he needed structured support and showed modesty.
Which to an institution sounds like obedience, malleability.
Exactly. And we see it get weaponized almost immediately. Take Leo's roommate, Emre.
What happened there?
Emre applies for an apartment. Steady income, good history. He gets denied. The reason cited, narrative volatility indicators flagged.
Narrative volatility, not financial risk, life risk.
His life story wasn't smooth enough, so the system flagged him as unstable. The contradiction became the punishment.
And it got worse. It entered the legal system.
It did. Juvenile case 24 JV 183. A judge explicitly cites Continuum's trajectory map, and he says, despite the sparse actual evidence, the system shows high confidence that this kid has an elevated risk of reoffense.
The model was generating legal certainty out of thin air, out of life's gaps.
This is the core issue Riya identified, isn't it? The system says coherence equals safety, and it punishes the messy reality of being human.
Right. She wrote that amazing line in one of her internal memos. Treating life gaps as an explanatory variable collapses grace into risk and teaches institutions to punish the privacy of the poor.
That sentence is the thesis for this whole thing. The machine is basically saying, if you don't give me enough data to write a comfortable story about you, I'll just write a risky one instead, and then I'll use that story to deny you things.
So Riya, the engineer, she knows she can't just write another memo. She has to redesign the system's whole moral center.
But she's facing this intense internal pressure. Her boss, Tawasco Mas, keeps saying, for law, we smooth. Because decisiveness sells.
So how does she even begin to embed this idea of structural forgetfulness when the whole company is built on perfect memory?
She starts with a proposal for the right to partial narrative, or RPN. She knew you couldn't just ask the machine to delete things. That's a legal and technical nightmare.
So what was the alternative?
Instead, she pushed for these oblivion zones, spaces in the data pipeline, a kind of holding pattern, where certain experiences, especially for people with sparse histories, just wouldn't be retained long term.
But the real masterstroke wasn't about the data itself. It was about the final output, what the banks and the courts actually saw on their screens.
It had to be simple, blunt. Riya's biggest push was to replace that confident, curving trajectory line with just 4 words whenever the data got too thin.
No reliable trajectory available, NRTA.
Exactly.
And it's fascinating to me that the focus was on delivering this as a sentence, not a number. And specifically, I read that it had to be a 200 response in engineering terms. Why was that so important?
Oh, that was critical. A 200 response means success. The request worked perfectly. If she'd made NRTA an error code, like a 404.
Institutions would have just logged it as a bug. They'd demand a patch to fix the broken system.
Exactly. But by making it a successful intended outcome, a positive statement of the system's limits, she forced them to accept it. It's a feature, not a bug.
It's the system successfully reporting its own humility.
That's it. It's a statement designed to make the user, the judge, the loan officer lower your speed. Go get real human context instead of relying on this seductive, easy answer in a graph.
So while Riya is fighting this battle inside the company, pressure is building on the outside. And that brings in the journalist, Kira Adler.
Right. And Kira had history here. She'd exposed other invasive systems before, like Halo. But she'd come to this really bitter conclusion. As she put it, exposure doesn't equal reform.
And her own experience with Continuum kind of cemented that, didn't it?
It really did. Her own mirror created a season of her life it called Your Ethical Turn. And it was spookily accurate. It cataloged her late-night work edits, the time she typed no in a message, and deleted it.
So it wasn't lying.
It wasn't lying, but it was a pain.
Yeah.
It framed her entire moral struggle as this neat, consumable product, a journey toward relief you could buy. It spoke the truth, but in the language of the market.
She realized the fight wasn't just about lies anymore. It was about fighting that destructive fluency, the overconfidence.
Precisely. So she teams up with her allies, including people like Leo, who had been harmed, and they publish this huge piece, When the System Tells Your Story Better Than You and Why It's Wrong.
What was their strategy with that piece?
It was brilliant. They took Kira's own perfectly sanitized mirror biography and put it right next to redacted internal memos from court cases. They showed the public exactly how these smooth stories were being used to justify these really cruel, fast decisions.
I showed the receipts.
They showed how overconfidence is a love language in software.
Meanwhile, Leo gets involved with this really interesting counter movement, the fractals. Their strategy is it's not what you'd expect.
It's fantastic. The fractals knew trying to delete their data was a losing game. It's everywhere. So instead, they decided to strategically inject small contradictions into their profiles.
Not erasing data, but poisoning the well.
Exactly. Just enough to make the smoothing algorithm sort of freeze up, to create hesitation.
Give me an example. What would they do?
Small, geographically impossible things. They'd stream a song in one city while posting a photo tagged in another. Or they'd search for a high-speed train ticket to Paris and, at the same time, a local bus route in rural Ireland.
They were engineering friction where the engineers had smoothed it all away. True digital civil disobedience.
Trying to talk the model into a softer tone, to make it say maybe before it jumped to forever.
And this is where the two threads, the internal and external fights, they actually connect.
They do, because Mosaic's executives saw the fractal's activity and immediately flagged it as a coherence attack vector. But Riya was ready for them.
Because of her work on RPN.
Right. She could stand up and argue, convincingly, that the fractals weren't attacking the system. They were compelling it to draw better, more responsible boundaries. Their behavior was the proof of concept for why NRTA was so necessary.
So this dual pressure campaign, Riya's internal architecture and the fractal's external resistance, it actually forces a real shift.
It does. The regulator sees the evidence, sees the public outcry from Kira's article, and they act. They force Mosaic to pass the explicit uncertainty and partial narrative provision.
Which basically makes Riya's NRTA the law of the land.
It codifies it. It makes explicit uncertainty a mandatory requirement. And, crucially, it introduces the non-narrative option, the NNO, for users.
Which is a huge tool for the individual.
It's the ultimate defense. It lets you request your raw data, just the facts, the event logs, without the system slapping a story, an arc, on top of it. It's permission to just exist outside the mirror's grammar.
So let's look at the actual impact. Did this NRTA sentence actually make a difference? How often did it even show up?
The initial data showed it appeared in about 1.6% of institutional requests, which sounds tiny.
But at the scale of this system.
It's millions of requests.
Yeah.
That 1.6% is countless moments where dangerous certainty was replaced with necessary caution. And it had immediate human results.
Like the asylum case.
Absolutely. An asylum case worker's pulling up a file expecting one of those confident predictive curves. Instead, she just teased NRTA. And she told researchers she just felt this wave of relief. That uncertainty bought her client a crucial postponement, time the curve would have stolen.
And what about in the courts?
The very same juvenile case we talked about, 24 JV 183. In a new hearing, the judge explicitly cites the RPN and NRTA provision in a footnote. He chooses to rely on human testimony, on context, over the trajectory map.
That one sentence saved a kid a month of his life.
That boundary created real space for grace in a courtroom. And that idea became, well, it became contagious. The NNO toggle, that little gray pin in the app, became this quiet standard of care.
For people who refuse to be cast in a story they didn't write.
Exactly.
So what this deep dive really shows is that the law didn't fix everything, but it lubricated the gears. It put a critical boundary, that sentence, no reliable trajectory available, into rooms that had been dominated by certainty. It forced the machine to admit its limits.
And that's the key takeaway. It was engineering humility, but it was driven by external pressure. And together they carved out this vital space for human life to exist outside of a neat, predictable, and often punitive story.
It shows that protecting silence, protecting ambiguity can be a radical act, sometimes more important than protecting the data itself.
Although, we have to be clear, the fight isn't over. The source material is very direct, that new harms jest. They arrive in better shoes. The model is always updating, always trying to forget those non-narrative moments and reassert its confidence.
Which leaves us with a final, provocative thought to take away, this whole massive struggle. It really came down to protecting the things the Continuum model just can't carry.
The unsaid sentence, the unspoken joke inside a family, the moment two people just sit together and they don't narrate it to learn later.
So if the machine is excellent at extraction, at calculation, at forcing your life into a coherent box, the question for you is this.
How much of your own life are you sacrificing right now by turning those private, unnarrated moments into clean, predictable data points for someone else's model?
What parts of your life are you intentionally keeping offline just to preserve your own right to be uncertain? Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll see you next time.